And I think, yeah, the most standout thing of this circuit is just, that it's a night race. It really makes these cars look alive. It's super fast through the mountain section. So just the circuit has such good flow, it's such good rhythm, and for the driver, that's what makes a great circuit.
Hello and welcome to the Mayman Show. There's nothing usual about today as we are coming to you from the City of Earth, Diriyah, for the Diriyah E-Prix. And today we have with us the driver for the Team Avalanche Andretti, Jake Dennis. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me, guys.
I mean, it's a pleasure to have you on the show, and thanks for taking time, to interview, have this interview during the halftime of the races and everything.
Yeah, I know, it's a cool opportunity for myself and obviously to give you guys a bit of an insight from a racing driver.
Yeah.
So yeah, pleasure to be here.
Gonna be fun. Okay, so you're in the first standing. You've been in the podium twice this season,
Yep.
and you're the winner of the Mexico E-Prix.
That's correct.
So you're doing quite a good performance this season. So how does it feel to be back in Diriyah? And what makes the Diriyah track and just the Diriyah E-Prix different than any other destination for the Formula E?
Oh, it's great to be back here. It's my third season here. And I think, yeah, the most standout thing of this circuit is just, that it's a night race. It really makes these cars look alive. It's super fast through the mountain section. So just the circuit has such good flow, it's such good rhythm. And for the driver, that's what makes a great circuit. And to do it, obviously, under the floodlights, it's a very special feeling and, yeah, something I enjoy coming back here each year.
All right. And this race is a bit different because, Formula E is debuting the Gen 3 car.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on the Gen 3 car so far? I mean, I know a lot of the drivers are talking about grip and power, but just from a driver's perspective and keep it as layman as possible, you know what I mean? How does it feel to drive the Gen 3 car in a track like the Diriyah Prix?
It just feels like you're, like a bobsleigh down like an ice rink. It's moving around a lot. You're in between the walls, and to be racing these fast cars, because in a straight line they're incredibly fast. It's super challenging, and when you're in between the walls, when it's nighttime, everything feels 10 times faster. So it's a great experience. It's a really good thrill. And excitement for the driver, especially in qualifying, when you have to risk absolutely everything to deliver the lap. And something which you don't get very often in motorsport these days, but thankfully with Formula E racing at street circuits, it's something which we experience quite a lot.
Okay, and roughly, like, what's like a key consideration that you feel makes the Gen 3 car significantly different than the Gen 2 car?
Just the amount of power it has. This thing now has an extra 150 brake horsepower from last season, and it's 70 kilos lighter. So it's considerably lighter and it's more power. So put those two combinations together, you've got a very quick race car. And we've also the tyres themselves don't supply that much grip. They're multi-use, so they can drive in the dry and wet, which is something which doesn't happen in most motorsports. So this means when it's like a dry surface, we actually don't really have that much grip to move around with. So when you're in between the walls with low grip and high power, it makes life extremely challenging. But that's what we're here to do and put on a good show for everyone.
All right, and you've been in the previous Diriyah Prix and here in Saudi Arabia. So how do you see this? Like basically the Diriyah Prix evolving every time you come here and. Where do you see the sport going? I mean, it's the race of the future, technically.
Exactly, yeah. I think the sport is growing massively as Formula E. It's the third generation car, it's the ninth season, and everything's just evolving year by year. The biggest difference to last season are these amazing garages. They're fully LED. You can put whatever you like on it. And they move with the race. So when it's a yellow flag on circuit, if there's been a crash, they'll tell you on the big screens. And that's just something unique which you don't get in any other sport. Formula E are always pushing the boundaries of new technology, and the software on these cars are always evolving. And I know the sort of platform's never ending, and it's a real great thing to be a part of.
All right. And, aside from the race, whenever Formula E is in town, there are a lot of interesting sideline events, with concerts. For example, you have John Legend performing.
Yeah.
You had Maxwell. You had a lot. You have a lot of talent coming in. So what's like from your opinion, what's it like? I'll use it as an example. Taking this live party around to different parts of the world.
Yeah, it's amazing. We've had some incredible performers here. Last year we had The Script. This year, like you said, John Legend, French Montana, David Guetta, Martin Garrix, and it was just like, these guys are top performers and they put on a great show. The facilities here, where the podium is based, is top level. It's huge. The cars drive up onto the podium and see all the fans. So it's so unique and something which doesn't happen very often. I got to experience it yesterday, finishing second, and something which I hope to experience more. But it's great to you can literally pick up this whole Formula E paddock and then just transfer it to the next city. So that's something which makes it so special. It's a lot of hard work for everyone, especially the guys within the team. The drivers get it pretty easy.
Yeah.
We just drive the race cars, but the man hours which go into it are impressive.
Okay, and you've been here in Saudi a couple of times.
Yeah.
What do you think of Saudi? What have you seen since in all your trips that you've been?
Yeah,
so
Saudi's
far?
a cool place. I've only ever been to Riyadh. I haven't been to anywhere else like Jeddah or anything like that. But it's a city.
Good place to start.
Yeah, I mean it's like a mini Dubai in terms of it's always evolving. The facilities are just growing bigger and bigger. The circuit facilities are getting better. It looks like inside the stadium or inside the circuit, the facilities are becoming more and more popular. And I'm really looking forward to the future of racing here in Riyadh. I think we'll be here for quite some more years.
Yeah.
Because I think it's probably the driver's favourite circuit. And racing underneath the lights, like I said, is something which we only do once. So hopefully it's many more years to come. But it's great to see the country is evolving and the facilities are getting better and better.
All right, and being a renowned international driver from around the world, what are your thoughts about the motorsports industry here in Saudi and how it's evolving, and how do you basically see what differentiates your average Saudi motorsports fan from other fans around the world?
Yeah, the fans here seem really engaged. They're really interested. Everyone generally comes up to you and says well done for finishing, and they'll tell you your position. They really have a connection between where you actually finished. It's not just someone saying well done and they don't really know where you actually finished. So it's great to see that they are fully involved and they do genuinely follow the sport, because it's not always like that. But just the amount of young kids I've seen which are telling me that they race go-karts, and it's really great to see. It's not something which I have a massive amount of knowledge on. I don't really know the ins and outs of motorsport in this side of the world, but it's just from what I've experienced from the fans and I'm speaking to them, there's a lot of young talent out there. There's some 6-7-year-olds already driving go-karts. So it's awesome to see, because obviously one time I was in their position, and they look up to us, and ultimately this is where they want to be, here or Formula One, or generally making a career out of motorsport.
I mean, we're both in their position, but I think you're the one who made the career out of motorsports, and I decided to be a journalist. So, Saudi is, okay, aside from hosting the Formula E, Saudi hosts Formula One and Dakar Rally, which just gave you 3 of the biggest races around the world.
Dakar's an awesome race.
Exactly. So what's your thought about, basically the Kingdom's initiative and contributing to the global motorsports scene and industry?
I think it's great to see. It's not like there's one particular country just taking all the limelight for everything. There's a lot of countries which have really big events, but Saudi lately has really had a good investment into sport as a whole, like you said, Formula One and Dakar, and then here, but also boxing. It's massive. So it's great to see that they have an interest. They're trying to obviously get the tourists in and really grow the city or grow the country. And I've came from being here 3 years ago to now, and I can already see an improvement. And just an engagement with the fans. They know a lot more about motorsport than what they did 3 years ago, at least from my experience. And I think that's due to bringing Formula One over to Saudi. I think that was huge. Formula One at the moment is massive due to the series of Drive to Survive on Netflix. That was a really big hit. And you know, and Formula E is gradually becoming more and more popular now. It's a world championship level, and it's great that Saudi bring us over and invite us to come race on this cool circuit.
All right. And so, you know, I have to ask you this question because, you know, like the general projection around the world is Saudi Arabia is the country that produces oil. So, you know, like, how does it feel to know that you're in a country that, you know, we're relatively, I mean, we both know that right now it's not, the focus isn't oil, it's diversifying the economy. But how does it feel to know that, you know, the race of the future, an electric race, is being held in a country that has, you know, the stereotype of being the oil producing country?
Yeah, but I think the cool thing with Formula E is that we don't just race in countries just for the sake of it. You know, we don't just choose a location and go, okay, we want to race there just because it's cool. You know, every race we go to, there's a reason. You know, Saudi are obviously doing their best to try and promote sustainability. I think everyone's, you know, trying to move in that direction.
Yeah.
Formula E's the best possible situation for them with, you know, it's a motorsport which is fully electric. These cars are super fast now. You know, the acceleration is the same as Formula One cars, and then with a straight line long enough, you know, we reach some serious top speeds of like close to 300 kph. So it's great to see that, you know, even though, yes, they are known for oil and obviously bringing a lot from that, but it's they're trying to promote sustainability, and I think a lot of countries need to obviously lean more towards that as well.
Okay. And let's get back to your beginnings a bit. So you started out in karting, from what I understand, right? So, like, you know, can you just give us a glimpse of how you transitioned, you know, from karting to a Formula E driver?
Yeah, mine was actually quite unique. You know, you start at a young age. I started at the age of 8, which, you know, you get the likes of some drivers now starting at the age of 4 years old, which is incredibly young. But I started when I was 8, which is pretty ordinary. And then I just gradually progressed all the way through to the juniors and seniors of karting. I moved out when I was 15 years old into single-seaters. And I spent most of my junior career, you know, trying to make it to Formula One. Came quite close at certain times. But then it didn't really quite work out. And I actually made a transition to sports cars and started to race for Aston Martin. I spent a good few years with them, and then, you know, I just was in the right place at the right time to take an opportunity with BMW, who were in Formula E at the time, and they gave me a seat, and lo and behold, 3 years down the line, you know, I finished top rookie in my first year, finished 3rd in the championship, had multiple race wins now, and it's a great place for me to be.
All right, and then when they finally, when you finally made the transition to a Formula E driver, what were your thoughts like? How did you feel that you had to evolve, basically, as a driver?
It was a big relief, you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Just because you work so hard to make it as a professional, and I turned professional with Aston Martin 3 years before that, but you never really, like, it's probably not enough to, you know, keep you going in the motorsport world, and you still always had doubt. But when you become a Formula E driver, you know, it's the highest level of motorsport you can do, or one of the highest levels, and I think it was, a big relief, and a lot of effort had paid off to obviously make it to the top. But, you know, still a lot of hard work to go into it now, even more now, to, you know, maintain at the top level. You know, we're currently leading the championship, and it's not easy to do that. And if we can try and keep up the hard work, which I've had since the age of 8, all the way until like, I'm 27 now. So it's a lot of years of sacrifice, a lot of years of hard work, and missing out with my friends and stuff like this to get to me where I am now.
Okay, and so you've always wanted to race for
always,
Okay.
It was. I didn't grow up in the motorsport world. Like, my dad didn't race or anything like that. I was just. I just took an interest to it at the age of 8 years old, and then it sort of evolved from there. But yeah, I didn't come from a family which were motorsport related.
Okay, and what kind of? Did you get any support from your family when they found out that you wanted to race?
Yeah, they were pretty supportive. You know, I didn't come from a wealthy background at all, so thankfully I managed to get sponsored at the age of 12, up until the age of 21, who paid for absolutely everything. So I was in a really fortunate position with my sponsors called the Race and Steps Foundation at the time, and I had sort of 10 really successful years with them. And I owe them a lot, because obviously they put millions and millions of money into me, and, you know, I can repay them back now, obviously by turning professional. But yeah, it's something which I didn't dream of as a kid, for sure.
Yeah? Okay, so when you finally made it, like, let's say your first race or second race, give me a moment of your life where, that really stands out, in your mind, like something that you want to take in, that you want to talk about as well?
Once I'd made it, I think it was when it was actually here, because this was used to hold the first race of the year, and it's my first Formula E race.
Yep.
And you leave the grid here, you're in the garages at the moment, and you drive to the grid, and you've got that one lap to get all your emotions out and really think, okay, I need to fully focus for this and give it my all. And then you're sat on the grid waiting for the lights to come on, and you're like, okay, this is it. I've made it. I now need to perform and do what I've been made to do. And that was a pretty surreal moment, and I think every racing driver has experienced that at least once in their life. If their goals are always changing, then they'll experience it a few times, but if their main goal is just to make it as a professional, then that would be it. And something which I remember forever. You always have the race wins, you always remember your first win or your first podium or stuff like that, but I think that as a memory for me was driving to the grid as a Formula E driver was something special.
All right. And so how'd you feel when you won the Mexico E-Prix?
That was unreal. The stadium section in Mexico is something so unique. It doesn't happen very often, and I think it's one of the best races to win because the engagement from the fans, the fans are cheering and stuff like this, and to have such a good atmosphere, the confetti, the Mexican flags, it was something which I won't forget, and something I hope I can repeat.
Okay, and so did you celebrate afterwards? How are the sideline events over there?
There were a couple of tequilas.
I can imagine it'd be fun.
There was a couple of tequilas involved, and celebrating with my team. But Saudi was only 2 weeks away, so I had to fully focus for this race and get involved. So it was enjoy that Saturday night, and then back to work Monday and get ready for this weekend.
All right. Okay. So I mean, you've made a lot of sacrifices in life, as you said. Hanging out with friends, having a childhood, and everything. But you must have had a pastime that you liked, that you enjoyed. Everyone has a downtime, and that's your pastime. So what was yours, I guess, growing up, and what's yours now?
I think growing up was still at the racetrack, but I was a young age, maybe 8 to 12, and every time you'd finish the session of driving, all the other drivers would come together and just probably play football or something like this in between, waiting for the next race, stuff like this. And they were like my family, they were like my friends. At school, I wasn't often at school, so I was too busy racing. So, the motorsport industry is such a big family, or such a small family, but a big community. And the childhood memories of just kicking a football about, messing around with your mates, and then jumping into a go-kart was something pretty cool. And then now it's more just appreciating time with my family and friends. Obviously we're not kicking a football around anymore, but just spending quality time with them is something super rare. Doesn't happen very often. Most of my mates are racing drivers, so they're also different parts of the countries, and it's just rare to get maybe 3 or 4 of your mates all together at the same time, and if that does happen, then we generally have a good time.
All right, and your background's very interesting. So you've in the kingdom there are a lot of hopefuls and aspiring individuals who want to get into the motorsports industry, who are male and female, and you're seeing a rise with different sort of events like time-lapse races, karting, drifting competitions, the works. What is your advice to someone that wants to follow that passion, especially with the path that you've told us that you've taken?
I think you just got to enjoy it. People always say you've got to work hard, which is true. You have to work hard at anything to be good at it, but you can only put in so much hard work if you only enjoy it maybe 70 or 80%. You really have to love the sport and love what you do, and then giving it your all day in, day out is generally not that much of a big deal. I live and breathe motorsport, and I love racing these things. So find something which you absolutely love doing, and then hit that with full commitment, full passion, and don't let any distractions get in your way. You really need to take those sacrifices which you think are big at the time, but you look back at your younger self, and that one party or that one You know, football match, what you might miss,
Yeah.
means absolutely nothing.
Weekend with with your friends. You know?
Exactly. If it means that you need to go training because you need to go to the gym because you want to be a runner or whatever, or you want to, like I said, drive these racing cars. But like I said, you've got to enjoy it. It's the biggest thing.
All right. And before we wrap up our interview, I mean, we don't want to be a distraction for you today. What
fine.
message do you have for our Arab News audience?
Well, thanks for tuning us. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for having us. I absolutely love this country. The atmosphere, which the race produces, the night race is absolutely incredible. So I hope you've enjoyed speaking to me and getting my insights of a racing driver. But yeah, it's been a great chat.
All right. Well, we've had a lot of fun having you on the show.
Thank you, man.
Thank you very much for taking the time to be with us.
Appreciate it.
Good luck, and we'll be watching you today.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right. And to quote Jerry Esbernella from the Diriyah Gate Development Authority, there is only one Diriyah, but there is only one Mayman show. See you next time.